Welcome to another edition of the Invisible Wheelchair Interview Podcast. I'm Donald Grothoff, family coach with FamilyOCD.com, FocusedHealthyFamily.com, and of course, InvisibleWheelchair.com. In the Invisible Wheelchair interviews, I get the wonderful chance to interview some of the experts with obsessive-compulsive disorders, professionals that treat OCD, people who are going through or have been through OCD, parents and caregivers of those suffering from OCD, and of course anyone that advocates for treatment of OCD. My goal of these interviews is to inform people on all aspects of OCD and bring about awareness of obsessive-compulsive disorder. The content, information, resources, and ideas that are talked about and brought up here in these interviews are not necessarily the views and opinions of myself, Family OCD, Focused Healthy Family, and Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, and I always recommend to seek additional professional help in finding solutions for yourself. You can find out more about me at FamilyOCD.com, FocusedHealthyFamily.com, and InvisibleWheelchair.com. The podcast you're about to hear was recorded and posted earlier in 2019 and is being posted now as part of the Best of 2019. So enjoy this podcast from the past as part of our Best of 2019. Thank you. This Invisible Wheelchair Podcast interview was recorded March 7th, 2019. This interview is a very special interview for me. It's very close to my heart. Today I got a chance to interview my wife, Gina. We've been married for 25 years, and she has partnered with me in raising our kids, and now she's actually partnering with me in our practice called Focused Healthy Family. And I wanted to be able to give to my audience here the opportunity to hear the other side of the story on our journey through my daughter's OCD. So I'm so glad that she's been able to share with me today her side of it, to give her viewpoint on things. We did a bio based on our practice, and I'd like to read that to you for her intro. Gina brings to the practice her knowledge and experience as an occupational therapist since 1992, her insights as a homeschooling mom since 1997, a lifetime of journaling and writing that has evolved into a parenting blog, a former La Leche League leader, and her desire to empower others on their parenting journey. Now, let's go to the interview. So I'm really glad you're able to do this with me today. This audience has heard my voice over and over again, and I think it's important to get the other side of our story. And so I'm glad you are doing this with me today, Gina.
I'm glad to be here.
So what I'd like to start out with is if you'd be willing to share when you first experienced the OCD issues that we had with our daughter. Gina, what I was going to ask you to do is if you could share your first experience that you had with what we went through with our daughter with the OCD.
What I first remember with Abby's OCD is there was a time when she felt the floor was dirty and she couldn't step on the floor. And I have a memory of when her friend was sleeping over and her anxiety escalating over not being able to touch the floor. And we had the idea to take a bunch of throw rugs and put them down to make like a pathway. I think we made a game out of it. I mean, she was 8 years old at the time. It was a temporary fix so she wouldn't be freaking out about the dirty floor. And I knew how embarrassing it was having her, best friend there and struggling through it. We had so much to learn at that point, not realizing what we were doing for her was compensating for the OCD and kind of feeding it. when I think back to the beginnings of it, I remember that time in particular.
How did you see what kind of took off from there?
I just, that first couple months when it was going on and we weren't sure. I mean, I guess somehow we knew it was OCD, just trying to get a handle on it. I remember I didn't want to label her with it. So even though I had this understanding that that's probably what it was, I didn't want to call it that because I didn't want to label her. And we were trying so many different, methods to help her and to work through this. It was emotionally draining, just helping her through this. I don't know. When I look back on it now, I feel like we were so clueless in what we were doing. And because, what I remember is that before all that blew up, she'd been overwashing her hands for probably almost a year. And I have a good friend. She has OCD, and she suggested when we talked about Abby's hand washing that it could be OCD. And I remember thinking, my daughter doesn't have OCD. She's not obsessive about things. That's my older child. He's very obsessive and wants things in order and wants to know what's happening next. I had no idea what OCD really was. I had that mainstream media idea that OCD is someone being obsessive about things, and that's not what OCD is at all. And so I had someone who, clued in that it could be way before things got really bad. And if we had addressed it then, who knows? I always feel like I wish we could have gotten treatment sooner, because the sooner you get it, the worse it gets, the harder a treatment is. And it's just so much more you've got to overcome. So I feel like it's important to be an advocate for what OCD really is, because there's memes and everything all the time about jokes about OCD. And I wish I was more OCD and thinking it just means being neat and organized and cleaning. And I cringe when I see those things, because that kind of message is what kept me from getting my daughter treatment sooner. And so I want to educate other parents and other people so we don't continue to perpetuate that myth that OCD is a personality trait.
Well, and I know at the time too, our youngest was really young. I mean, he was still like
year old. Yeah.
Year old. How did that affect you? I mean, how did that play into it?
Well, I'm sure that he was at an age nursing him and caring for him, and he needed me very much. And all right about that same time is when I went back to work too. So it was just, a whole lot of challenges at once. And so I'm sure it was difficult to think through things clearly, because I was juggling, a baby and going back to work and getting help for my daughter. I know that I'm sure it affected him, because Abby went from being easygoing, fun-loving, whatever kind of kid to just freaking out over the littlest things. I mean, it was a big personality change. It was, very flip. And, she had loved her little baby brother, but now all of a sudden she couldn't touch him. And, I'm sure it was confusing to him and he didn't understand. And so I'm sure that was traumatic on him. And it was, traumatic for us, because she really, was like, OCD had robbed her of her childhood and her personality and of who she was, especially at the worst it got. It was challenging.
Speaking of challenges, I mean, what would you see as the most challenging part of it?
Well, not having the right information about it to get help early enough. I don't know. I always go back to that, and that's why I like to speak about this and write about it, is to clue people in to pay attention to these behaviors and anxiety. Kids act out in behaviors and we think, oh, it's a behavior problem. We need to fix it. We need to, punish them or take things away. But if it's caused by an anxiety disorder, you can't stop the behavior. You got to get to the root of what the problem is. I think a lot of kids out there suffer with OCD and go undiagnosed. And so having that information initially, knowing what to do and getting the right help from people. Some of the resources we found later, if we had them to start out, just having that network of support, I guess. And because it's a mental health illness, people don't understand. If your kid has cancer, it's, oh, let's raise money, let's send cards, let's embrace you. And your child has a mental illness, it's like, oh, we'll leave you alone. We don't want to bother you. Well, if you need something, let us know, but we don't want to disturb you. And it's very isolating. And I remember thinking that as we felt withdrawn from our friends, that, if she had cancer or something, people would be reaching out and supporting, and not that, if we asked them, they wouldn't be supportive, but it was very isolating.
What do you think was the most challenging part for our daughter?
Well, because we didn't label it right away, I think that was detrimental to her, because I know it helped once we could say, this is not your fault, because I'm sure she blamed herself. this is not your fault. This is an illness, like, getting chickenpox or getting the flu. You didn't cause this. And, to realize, no, this is not you. Like, she thought it was her. And to separate herself from, no, this is the OCD, and this is what OCD message is sending you. It's not who you are. And, I think once we got on board with therapy and the right kind of therapist who was doing the ERP therapy with her and helping her to identify that, I don't know. I'm not her. I can't even imagine what it's like to have OCD, and unless you have it. So I've only seen it through her eyes, but I imagine that was tough, and at such a young age, 8 years old,
Yeah.
It was out of control.
And how did you see it? What were the challenges for the family? I know from my side of it, but I'd like to understand it from your side. What you saw the challenges were as a family.
Well, everything kind of revolved around her and her illness. So I know, her older brother was 12, so 4 years apart. It affected him and our ability to do things for him. Just our time and energy, we were wiped. I remember when we got past the worst of things and we finally had a night where we ate dinner and we felt like we could relax, because when OCD was flaring and, it's just getting dinner and then getting people calmed and to sleep was exhausting, and it often took hours and hours that it was such a drain. It took everything out of us to do all that. Our youngest developed severe social anxiety and OCD as well. And it's like, well, no wonder that, what a traumatic way to grow up.
So I'm kind of curious, and you'd mentioned that you saw her washing hands before it kind of clicked really strong, which I remember that night too. Because we've kind of come up with the idea that she has pandas, correct?
Well, we can't identify that exactly. We reached out to practitioners early on about that, and nobody would pursue it with us. Said it didn't matter, which I don't agree with now. We don't know. I mean, she definitely had signs of it before the severe, it came, there were mild symptoms, and then it came on severely, which I guess still could be pandas. She had been over hand washing for a good year, and she had some fears of being poisoned. I have a distinct memory. We had dance and swimming, and we stopped at Chick-fil-A to get something to eat, and she just couldn't eat it. She was so afraid she was being poisoned. So there were signs before then when I look back, and I remember talking with my friend about, the hand washing, and she said it could be OCD, and I literally just blew it off, no. And so I didn't see those things so clearly until things flared up in the spring of whatever, goodness, she was 8, she's 17 now, 9 years ago, about this time of year. But then I looked back on it and I saw those other things that were going on and missing those early signs of things.
In this podcast, I talked a lot about the recovery part, like the ERP therapy that we went through. And of course, I talk about the help we got from even the naturopathic doctors and we did a lot of, you can remember, we were drawing at straws almost trying to figure out what was going to be.
Therapy, EFT, Alpha Stem, just diet changes. Oh, we went cold turkey off sugar. That was a nightmare because sugar is a very addictive substance, and you shouldn't take a child cold turkey off sugar because they're going to be climbing the walls to get to the rice milk. And the diet changes wound up helping the behavior. I lost weight because I went off sugar too. So, people had advised us of that, but, someone needed to say, don't do this cold turkey.
Yeah, do it moderately.
That's not a good thing to do for your sanity. But we were doing a lot of different alternative things and trying these different things, but we didn't find the therapist till she was 9, and I really wish we had gotten in way sooner with that.
What did you see as your role in her recovery? What can you elaborate on that?
Well, as we learned about ERP, and it did some intensive ERP with her, and because we homeschooled and we're home with her, we were able to do lots of work on it, along with weekly therapy sessions. I think the challenge was helping her through it and not getting emotionally involved as her parent. I remember reading things later about when you respond, you need to be very calm about it, and it's much, because when we got emotional and she, it just became a power struggle. And so, I learned that through the experience of doing it that way instead of, that it was a challenge to stay calm and help her. Because you see your daughter struggling and fearful, you want to, you want to help her feel better. You want to eliminate the fear. But with OCD, that means giving into it, which really in the long run is making it worse. So, and I remember realizing how much it was affecting the whole family and wanting more family support, and at the time I didn't feel that was necessarily out there. Like it would have been great to have a group to go to and talk to other parents who, I can't remember when I found the Parenting and OCD Yahoo group. And it was just awesome to find this. And I didn't find it till I don't know much later. These other parents and parents looking for alternatives and, being cautious with medications with young children and just supporting each other and hearing each other's stories. And that was a big help to me. Recommend that the Parenting and OCD, it's a Yahoo group, but, having support for something like this. And it's, it's great to have all these online resources, but there's nothing like to have face-to-face support with people that, probably would have been really helpful.
Well, I always credit you with being the one that helped me to understand the calming part, that you used to always say, just remember that inside of that little demon or whatever that was in front of us was our daughter, and we had to still be compassionate to that. So just throw out an appreciation and a gratefulness to you, because you helped me with that a lot and got me back out of what I always call my military mode, that wanting to just resist and go against it and all that. And it's very true. You can't go with that style. You have to be calm and,
you can't just say, stop it, don't do those behaviors, but you also can't get mad at, the way you please stop washing your hands. We need to stop now, and doing it in a calm, negotiating way versus, the emotional response of, oh my God, you're washing your hands again, that they're getting so chapped, and, trying to reason with someone who's dealing with OCD is the absolute wrong thing to do. You might as well be reasoning with the wall. It's not going to work. And you have to really somehow step outside of the emotion of it. And because otherwise you just get into a power struggle, and it's not easy to do. And I know I would read that and think that, but I wasn't always able to do it. And it definitely made a big difference, because if you come back with that strong emotion, it just flared everything up even more, just escalated the situation. But it's challenging when your child is throwing things and threatening you and threatening to hurt themselves and, and being loud and yelling. And when I say all that, it kind of brings me back, because it's been a while since we've dealt with that. And it was a lot.
Well, and half the time it was at 11, 12 o'clock at night, when the battles began, and.
Well, yeah, and she was overtired. And so the OCD was flaring, and, we were both exhausted. And yeah, those were some times.
One thing that I think for us that helped was we did a lot of tag teaming. I'd work it for, a couple of hours till I was just about, beat against the wall, and I'd come up and say, you go for it. And, I think in a way that really helped, because when you were able to come in calmer, it seemed to turn the whole thing around,
Right. Well, I was always very good at, when I was removed from it, I could see that you weren't doing things calmly. It's always easier to observe that in someone else but it helped me go, okay, we can't do it that way. That's not working.
Yeah.
So, being removed from it, and it helped me to see that. But yeah, we've kind of tag teamed with our parenting all along anyhow. So yeah, I guess, if you have one parent who's working full time, traveling, gone, large, parts of the day, then the other parent is burdened with that whole responsibility. So sure, I'm sure it helped to ease that we could do that for each other, to step away.
And that kind of leads me into another thought. I want to ask you, what kind of advice you'd give to other mothers. But the other thing I just thought about is, what advice would you give the spouse who doesn't get it, that has a hard time with it? What kind of suggestions might you make to the other spouse on what you could do to help the other one? Does it,
so if one parent is understanding the diagnosis of OCD and what's involved with treatment, and they're involved in it, and the other parent just doesn't get it,
yeah, exactly.
It's a behavior problem. They just need to be disciplined.
Yeah.
Education. You need to. How does your partner taking information? Is it videos? Is it hearing it from another professional? Is it reading things? Find how they learn and take in information and provide them with it in that format. They need to hear it from another dad or, mom or, a professional, or they need, to be educated. And I guess being patient, because getting angry at them is not going to help anything. But I imagine that would be extra trying. I mean, we were both on board with things and did it together as a team to get her help. So, wow, that just sounds even, more burdening to have, a partner, finding other resources and support, reaching out to family, friends, the community. You got to learn to ask for help, because I know I learned that when, Don, you had a heart attack years ago, and, you have to, no matter what's happening in life, and it's even harder with a mental illness, to ask for help and to seek those resources. Because, if you're struggling dealing with your child and then your spouse is, on a different page, that's going to add an extra challenge to it. But we really need to learn to ask for help from other people, whether it's, someone watching the other child, because it's hard to parent other children when you're dealing with a child who's flaring, with a severe OCD. It's hard to be there for more than just that child.
Well, and I think what you said about asking is big, because, like you said, there's some isolation that goes on. People, and I don't think they do it out of spite.
No, they don't realize it. They just see you're struggling and the emotions, and they like, oh, I don't want to bother you. I don't want to burden you. You've got enough on your plate. But they don't realize, it's so subtle, or, we don't realize how much stigma we have on mental illness, and our whole, society, our culture, it just has on it. Versus, a physical illness. When you had a heart attack, I had no problem asking people for help. It didn't, it's people like, yeah. Because people accept that. I don't know what it is, but with mental illness, it's different, I guess, because you feel like it's your fault as a parent. I mean, we even had a professional tell us that it was our fault. Yeah, people don't realize that saying, oh, I won't bother you, is the last thing that you want to hear. Tell me what I can do to help you, make a suggestion, could I take your other child? Because you might not be able to think of what kind of help you need. So to be supportive of other people, you need to step in and offer ideas and suggestions, or just ask what they could do to help. It's a tough one.
I think the idea of also educating them a little bit. I mean, you don't have to do a lot, but just let them know these are the kind of things that are happening.
Doing that with Abby's friends, I sent parents that links about OCD, and especially child-friendly links to information, so they could learn about it and at least understand a little bit more what she's going through. Because I remember I presented the idea of talking to her Girl Scout troop and her dance troop. And the dance troop, the dance instructor said, I'd have to talk to the parents if that was okay. And that just really, like, why wouldn't this be okay? She's dealing with this issue. Why can't I educate the other girls, what she's struggling with? And, but it was like, oh, we have to get approval for that, because, that stigma, it's really a mental illness stigma. I think the Girl Scout troop was fine with me doing it. I just didn't get the, to have the energy and effort to put it together never happened, because I was just exhausted from juggling her and the OCD and work and everything. But yeah, I remember I just kept thinking, if she had cancer, they'd be sending cards, and just realizing that stigma that's there. But
any last thoughts before we wrap this up?
Well, I just think, if you see any signs of, any anxiety in your child, to educate yourself. There's some good information on the internet. OCD Foundation website has, great amount of resources, and really digging around for support, and not necessarily believing the first thing you read on the internet, but trying to find resources and support, and getting information out there to other people on if you see a child in your life, a family member, a friend's kid that might be showing signs of this, to share some information with them, because the sooner they get help and treatment, the easier it is to fight that OCD. The more severe it gets, the the more trying it is for that child and everyone around them.
Well, I know you write a lot about it in your blog, so if you want if you want to tell the audience what your blog address is, I'll also put it up on the website, but let's go ahead and mention it here too, because you've got a lot of these stories and information up there too.
But I created my first blog, Gina's Life Journey. So it's Gina, Ginas, Life, Life, Journey, journey.wordpress.com. So that was my first blog site where I started writing about everything. And then I created my child-led learning blog, which is child, CHILD, led, LED, learning, LEARNING.wordpress.com. And there's more information there because that's geared toward parenting, and started with the Focused Healthy Family website to take some of the blogs and begin to put them on the Focused Healthy Family website as well. Sharing our story, if I can help even one other person, that's why I write. I write it helps me process and make sense of things and understand things and for my own growth. And if it can help, even one other person out there, I feel compelled to just share my experiences and what I'm writing.
Well, I'm so glad you shared today, because it was a good trip back to our story, and like you said, it always is helpful, I think, if we can help one or two people even, it's right. I think that's good. So thanks for doing that.
I appreciate it. Every time I write about this, I talk about it, it helps me reflect and realize how far she's come too.
Yeah.
She still has the issues and things but it's like, wow, she's overcome a lot. We've gotten through a lot of tough stuff, and it helps to look back on that to see, and to let other people know, when you're in the thick of it, it feels like, this is never going to get any better. It does, and it can.
And especially OCD, I think it's one of the more, I don't know if I want to use the word curable, but you can at least get to a place of living a fairly normal life, I guess, if you want to say it that.
Yeah, if the person suffering will get on board with the ERP therapy and, other supportive things that are needed with it, that there is a good path towards recovery, but it's not an easy one.
Yeah.
But there's help out there.
All right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
That concludes this podcast. Please leave me a comment or question below. That gives me good direction where to go on future podcasts. I would love to hear your invisible wheelchair stories if you're willing to share it. If you would, go to invisiblewheelchair.com and click on Tell Your Story. I want to remind you that OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is treatable, and I can help you get past OCD. So if you have heard this podcast and others, and you feel like you need further assistance and would like to spend some time with me working through any issues you have, then feel free to book a session at focusedhealthyfamily.com or familyocd.com, or you can call me at 704-562-1630. I also offer $85 off initial discovery session if you mention that you heard it on this podcast. Finally, don't forget that there is a tapping recording that coincides with this podcast you may want to take advantage of. I hope you have enjoyed this podcast and will join me for the next one. Remember to keep tapping, talking, and transcending your life to new heights. Thank you, and have a great day.